Howdy students, it's Miss T again. So we're picking up where we left off with these subsistence strategies that do not support very large numbers of people. So they're kind of not on a cultural geographer's radar because really with the focus of population and arable land, or the amount of land that agriculture can sustain a population or engage in global trade because of agriculture, these subsistence strategies are really not the focus of cultural geography, but I want you to have this background so that you can understand where the demographic transition model is picking up from, and also where Thomas Malthus was coming from when he predicted his dire outlook on the future about the population not being able to have enough food. Okay. So in this video, let's look at horticulture and pastoralism. These are two subsistence strategies also. This supports larger numbers of people than, it's still very small, but it supports larger numbers of people than foraging does, okay? It's still really small though. But these horticulturalists usually have permanent settlements, okay? And we know, permanent settlements. There we go. And we know that they had permanent settlements because about 13,000 years ago, in the archaeological record, we start to see evidence. We start to see artifacts and evidence of manipulating the environment that's been left behind from about that era. So we're able to look at the science that archaeologists practice to find out, how old certain things are, and it's about 12 to 14,000 years ago, we can find horticultural centers around the world. Now, I will post a map where I have circled the areas that I'm about to tell you about, but for instance, along the Tigris and Euphrates River in Mesopotamia, in South America, in certain places along the coastlines in Africa, there are some of these horticulture centers where there's evidence that permanent settlements took place, and this nomadic foraging lifestyle was not the only means, the only subsistence strategies that human beings had after horticulture came into play. So horticulture uses small amounts. Horticulture, let me see, it needs large amounts of arable land, but they don't keep the arable land in production all the time. So horticulturists need a large amount of arable land, but they don't keep it in production because there's no artificial or chemical fertilizers, no artificial irrigation methods, fertilizers, none of this blue Miracle Grow kind of stuff, right? It's all natural processes and natural stuff that's used for irrigation and fertilization. And there's no huge herds of animals where you're going to collect manure or something and apply it, because you are not into animal husbandry and horticulture. If you keep animals, it's very few of them, only for your immediate social group. So with horticulture, you need a large amount of arable land, but most of the land lies fallow for a great many years in between times when you prepare it to cultivate the food that you and your immediate social group need to survive over the 12-month period. So fallow means the land might be arable, and you might have just finished using it for a 3 or 5 year period to produce the food, most of the food that you and your family and the rest of your small community, or whoever lives in that permanent settlement, needs in order to survive. So it's going to be the bulk crop, for instance. You will also have foraging as part of this. Foraging, hunting, and gathering is part of the calorie-getting strategy that horticulturalists use. So foraging is part of horticultural subsistence. Sorry, my typing is so slow and incorrect today. But anyway, so fallow Let me go back up here to fallow, because there is, I guess, a misconception that a lot of people have when they hear about the way that you start to prepare your arable land for use. Because there's no artificial fertilization, what fallow means is land is left alone. Land is left alone to go back to nature. Okay? What going back to nature means is that birds and animals and seeds that fall or blow through the wind, all these kinds of things are going to start growing up on that land. Trees are going to start growing up on that land. Little woodland creatures are going to start living on that land when the trees are large enough to give them a habitat that they like the looks of. And so so land lies fallow for many decades in some cases. And so you, in your settlement, you're going to need to eat every single day of every single decade. So you need a whole lot of land that can be arable, but because you have no artificial fertilization, you have to let the land go fallow in order to replenish the nutrients in the soil so that you can get the yield that you need from that land, so that you can consistently feed the number of people in your permanent settlement. And while there is a larger number of people in these permanent settlements than foraging can support, they're still not huge. You wouldn't even call it a town. It's going to be a collection of families who work together. Every generation of people works together as far as a division of labor goes in foraging and also in horticulture. There is a division of labor, but these things, okay. I didn't explain when I talked about division of labor. Because there's a division of labor, you get social inequality, okay? So up here with division of labor, just in general, there is division of labor with each of these subsistence strategies, but with agriculture, division of labor is a bigger deal because you see greater amounts of social inequality that happen when the work that you do is farther away from, I'm saying this sentence in a more complicated way than it needs to be stated. If your work is directly related to agriculture and you have a vital role in agricultural production, you're not merely a field worker who is very replaceable, but you have a vital role in agricultural production. Maybe you're a landowner, maybe you are, a scientist who studies, these plants and tries to make sure that the yield is good, and you work on fertilizer and irrigation and all these kinds of things. The higher up you are in society, the higher position and the greater amount of elitism you have in that society. So you see a lot of division of labor that creates a massive gap between owners and workers with agriculture. Down here with foraging, there's also, one more thing about agriculture, there's also a big inequality that develops between males and females and young and old. Down here with foraging and horticulture, there is inequality in society. However, the inequality is less about your social rank and more about just what jobs are assigned to you. Like, for instance, with foraging, hunting typically is assigned to males and foraging typically is assigned to females, but processing of those foods and making the tools that you need in order to gather effectively, in order to hunt effectively, all of those jobs are divided out, young and old, male and female, in a society so that you don't really have huge gaps where some people are elite and other people are untouchable, to use an extreme example. So foraging, we often call it an egalitarian society. Egalitarian does not mean people are exactly equal, but they have a relatively equal social rank, because all of the work that they do, even though it's divided up unevenly, the work has relatively the same social value for the overall survival of the people in the population. In horticulture, you see a little bit more, so it's not egalitarian, you see a little bit more division of labor, but typically gender and age are the reason that you have a different job. And this laying fallow of land, since land goes back to nature and you have to rotate land all the time, clearing a field, I don't know if any of y'all have ever tried to do that before or help with that, but clearing land and plowing the land, since it's all with hand tools, no animals help with this. You know, there's not any plows or anything like that. No animals or beast of burdens help. It's all hand tools and manual labor. And so typically males, middle-aged, youthful and middle-aged males are the ones who do the most important work for the survival of the settlement. So they have like the highest rank in society, and then everybody else kind of comes underneath that, but pretty darn close. And there's not a huge gap in social inequality, so social injustice happens. Everybody's kind of taken care of in the horticultural mindset. And you know, the gap, there is no gap between wealth and poverty, and nobody's going hungry, and children have just as much social value as elderly people. Elderly people have all of the knowledge, and they can train the young on how to do things properly and effectively. And young people, as soon as they can carry something, they are helping haul stuff off the land, or they're helping with foraging. Same up here. They're helping to make the tools that need to be made in order to have a successful subsistence strategy, and that is all part of the relative equality, relatively little social stratification that happens in a horticulturalist society. It's very tiny, and the focus is not on surplus. They do not can things and save it for a rainy day. They do not produce extra. They produce only what their immediate social group needs for the time being. So populations are still very low, and that's one of the reasons in cultural geography we don't focus on this very much, just in this short little 10-minute section of this video. Okay, pastoralism is a subsistence strategy. It supports larger numbers of population because we transition from plant calories that come primarily from plants, to animal calories are how you get the bulk of your daily supply. And animal calories are much more plentiful when you start to have animals in your diet. So there are herds of animals that can endure what we're going to call harsh environments. And so that means it's not arable land. And you can look today and you can use these harsh environments as one of the why of where answers when you're looking at where in the world people are not populating this planet. It's because of harsh environments. So harsh environments would include things that are too high for, you know, oxygen to be available, for instance, for workers to be able to be productive, or they are too rocky, they don't have enough soil, for instance, or they're too dry. Deserts, for instance, plants and animals too need water for survival, you and I included, and also too cold. For, you know, there are some places in the world that have permafrost, and so there are, that's an example of an environment, 4 different examples of environments that are too harsh in order to have arable land. But pastoralism is pretty ingenious because people, you and I, are pretty smart and we want to survive. So if we find ourselves in these harsh environments, there is a way to use the environment for our benefit and for our population, and I will tell you what that is in our next short video. Thanks.